Well, hi there. It's always nice to talk with people about this kind of stuff. So thanks for watching me either now or later. Yeah, as Whitney was saying, what I want to go over is the sort of things I've heard from people I've talked with over the years, over the past 7 or 8 years, about how they're running, let's call them developer platforms. I'll get to a little bit of a fuller definition in a bit here. But no doubt you've heard about like what a platform is, a cloud native platform, or there's a phrase platform engineering people like to use nowadays. There's you got your Kubernetes stuff or otherwise, and a bunch of other things layered on top of it that application developers use. And what I've been interested in for a while, I mean, among other things, not just this, my life isn't that thrilling that this is the only thing, is learning from organizations, mostly large organizations that have been running a platform for a while, and how they are successful at it, but what they actually do to make it work out in their larger organization. And I'm saying large organization because I think I'm in the tech world, so I love my and my coworkers' navels as much as anyone else. But we like to do a lot of navel gazing about what we in the tech world do. And I think what I found in non-tech, what I think of as normal in a good way, organizations, governments, banks, pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers, maybe even people who do piping and plumbing supply business at scale, like they have a lot of different concerns and opportunities and constraints than these kind of thrilling tech companies, like the one that I work in, or other ones that might send you music or pictures of your nieces and nephews, things like that. So I've tried to collect together what people do in those large organizations to be successful with platforms, which in turn allows them to be successful with how they do software, how they make their own software that is used. As we know, the world has been eaten by software or something like that. I think it's better to, for us to eat software rather than be eaten by it. But I didn't get the chance to write that article for the Wall Street Journal. But you want to be better at software and have it be the way that you're running your organization, if only so that I can renew my passport faster, or we can buy things, or you can get more widgets out the factory. But underpinning all of that, I think nowadays is a good platform if you're trying to do things in a modern style. So where does this, one of the kind of context for an interest in platform, and I think also getting better at it than maybe not historically has been done, but then is done by many people at the moment. I think this is one angle of looking at it. Why would you be interested in platform engineering, getting better at a platform, learning from multiple years of what other large organizations have done? And that is, if you look at there's many different reasons, but one that I think of often. Again, I think of a lot of things often, but when I'm thinking on this topic, I reflect on this. This is multi-years from our Kubernetes survey that we at VMware have done over the past 5 or so years. 5 years. I've only used 4 years of data here because the thing you learn about a vendor sponsored report is the first year you can kind of just ignore as they're figuring things out. But the next years are always great. Like if you go back and you look at the original DevOps report from Puppet, the first 2 years are delightful to look at. They're totally fun, but they didn't. You can see the ideas of the full-on Dora thing coming in there. Anyhow, so I have the good years here. And what you see is the benefits that people have achieved from running Kubernetes, right? So, of course, the State of Kubernetes survey would be interested in that. And we survey, I went and checked the demographics. It's not just a bunch of Swedish music companies that we survey. We survey like actual large organizations across geographies, company sizes, industries, and things like that. And what you can see in this one area that I wanted to highlight, because I like applications and software developers, is that this goal of getting our software development better by having more frequent releases, which is not the only way to rate good software. Ultimately, the way to rate good software is if it's good, but that's kind of, not, that's if you get the outcome you wanted, to use that phrase, if you can stomach business talk. But you can see this goal of shortening the release cycle hasn't been getting better. Well, it's been gotten a little bit better. So hopefully this coming year, when we do the survey again, you'll see that the dark blue bar, whatever color I choose to make that, will go up. But for some years, it started off people who were using Kubernetes as their kind of platform as choice. Things were cool. You see that green bar there. And then they started to go down. They weren't benefiting from the shortening of cycles. Now, just as a side note, I always like to be a little bit of a PowerPoint pedant during these things. Oftentimes you might hear when you put together a slide, you shouldn't put big charts like this with little text together. Because your audience will focus on them and maybe they can't even read them. But I say that's wrong, because if they can't read them and you see a chart, what you can do as a speaker is you can tell them what you wanted to think, as I just demonstrated, and yet have the credibility of a chart no matter what it says. But I want you to trust that it says exactly what I said. You can actually click on that if you get the slides and go dive into it some more. So you have this instance of like this great way of managing compute, of containers, orchestrating them, handling the configuration, that kind of standardization of cloud infrastructure that Kubernetes does. There's something up with it helping developers out, right? Something odd is going on there. And, I think this drives the question of like, well, how can I build a platform that will be better? Because as we know, as we've been told, Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms. So once we've built the platform, how do we run the platform, and how do we build the platform on the platform? Get a little lost there with all the platforms, but that's fine. But I think as sort of potentially depressing, if you allow your emotional well-being to be affected by IT industry surveys, despite what that looks like there, I think this actually matches like what one would expect from one of the core sort of laws or rules or whatever of new technology adoption, especially in the infrastructure and software world. And that is, if you're familiar with the diffusion of innovations curve, essentially what you kind of see in that chart is it moving through that bell curve. Now, obviously, you should always be suspicious when you've seen a smooth curve, but this is just sort of like a thought technology of how to think about things. But early on, when people were learning how to do Kubernetes the hard way, and they liked that, what you have in any sort of diffusion of innovation, as an innovation, as a new technology becomes more and more mainstream, is you have what's called innovators, or people who are very interested in the technology, and they will be almost on a scale of like just gratuitously using it because it's fun, what people like to call resume driven development, or because they feel like they can get such benefit from it that they will put up with whatever the deal is with the technology. But this is actually a very small amount of the market, if you will, the user base. And then the years go by, the technology gets better. You have the early adopters and more people doing it. And that kind of interest in putting up with the hijinks of the technology starts to fade as you go up. I should make a curve for that. So there's 3 curves on a chart, which would really be a PowerPoint no. But you can see as it goes up that curve, the people who are using it more and more are not really interested in being entertained by the effort that's required to go into getting the value from a technology. They don't want to tinker with it, right? They don't want to build like a Raspberry Pi compute cluster. They just want to get a really good laptop that's powerful, or a server somewhere. And so I think what you see is, again, as Kubernetes is more and more popular, and I think I encounter this anecdotally. I'm sure Whitney does, and other people that you'll talk with. More people are interested in Kubernetes, and so it goes more and more mainstream, as you see here. And so you get the kind of like need to work on it and layer on things that make it developer friendly are exposed to more and more people. So you start asking more people, and it kind of starts to slow down in the mainstream because you don't have these early adopters who are willing to do whatever, and they put in all the work with it. Now, thankfully, I think for this hump at the top here, right? Like the way that we get that chart going the right way, and I alluded to this already, is to realize that what you need to do with something like Kubernetes is build a platform on top of it, right? A platform that not only your application developers use, but that whoever's running the platform, that they start to use as well, right? Like if you've seen the Cloud Native Computing Foundation landscape of overwhelmingness, one way of looking at that is to be like shocked and upset. But another way of looking at that is that there's a tremendous amount of innovation going on to build out what this platform is, right? I mean, it's almost like you could look at that chart and say like, well, would I want the opposite of this, where there's not a lot of innovation and options? Or would I want this kind of area to kind of like have a lot of new things going on, people figuring things out. And so the task that you have if you're building a platform is to assemble together those things. Or, of course, you could use one of the best assemblages of these things, the Tanzu application platform, perhaps the best, depending on who you ask. You can ask me in chat later on, and I'm happy to give you my answer. But you want an assemblage of these things that's integrated together instead of, as those early adopters were doing, just kind of combining the stuff together on its own. Now, thankfully, when it comes to this idea of running a platform, assembling together a platform, even before Kubernetes was as popular as it was, there have been many companies building these kind of platforms that were very similar. And you see one here from JP Morgan Chase, a gigantic bank, if you're not aware of them. And they have been running a platform, several platforms, as most large companies have, for a long time. And there's a great presentation here of how they've been doing that and how they manage it ongoing. Again, I know you can't click on it now, but if you get the slides, I think it's really worth your time checking out this presentation if you're working on a platform team, to see how kind of one of your peers is doing it, and to kind of back up a lot of what I'm saying here. But we can extract a lot of lessons out of what people have been doing there, and over the years. And the older, which is to say, the more mature that these lessons are, the more they come from non-Kubernetes platforms, like Cloud Foundry-based platforms, like Pivotal Cloud Foundry, now called the Tanzu application service. But these rules apply the same. And then there's also plenty of rules, plenty of lessons that are coming out from Kubernetes-based platforms as well. So before we get into that, this is me. I'm Kote. I work at VMware, like I guess all of my coworkers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be my coworkers. I guess you could say colleague might be someone outside of your realm of work. I started off as a programmer way back when. The last programming job I had, you can see that my team won an innovation award, which was great. So I guess we were doing a good job. That's when I was at doing systems management stuff at BMC Software. I then went to go work at an analyst firm called Red Monk, and I did corporate strategy and M&A at Dell, because I worked in Austin, and you always have to do a 2-year service term there, mandatory. Maybe Whitney will get around to doing her 2 years at Dell sometime eventually. And then I ended up working at Pivotal and now at VMware. And I've really gotten the chance to study a lot of what I've talked about, talk with large organizations and see how they're getting better at software. But if you're interested in more of my nonsense, you can go look it up there. I've got a great newsletter that's probably needs an editor, but it comes out several times a week. You should subscribe to that. That would be what would make me most happy. But you can go there and check it all out. You can get, it's mostly output, very little input that I do there. So let's talk about briefly what a platform is. So I think that these two diagrams, especially the one on the left, is a great representation of a platform. So I guess it's like a year ago now. I used to say this last fall, which I guess it is last fall. I used to say in the fall, but this is a fall ago, not this fall. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation came out with a reference architecture for what a platform is. And if you look at this reference architecture, hopefully what you're thinking is like, computers. Like this is how the software stack works. And that's exactly the intention of it, right? So you have the infrastructure at the bottom, the capability and service providers, right? And here you should be thinking like, this is Kubernetes or virtualized cloud stuff, whatever it may be, maybe some crazy fun edge device that you have, and things like that. But then you go up that stack and you see that what you have in there is basically a whole bunch of like middleware and services that a developer would use that supports an application. And what's new and interesting, what I think I've spent like the past year or so trying to figure out what platform engineering is, anyone who runs around saying something is dead like DevOps, I get curious about what their deal is. And so it seems like there actually is something new about platform engineering, which is this notion, which I don't know, maybe people were doing this, but like, what if we extended what a platform is up into the developer tools, right? I don't really know a good phrase for this, but the internal collaboration and discovery and project sites. All that backstage stuff, or what Atlassian does. Like, what if part of the platform was that? And then we also extended it up into API management and these things that traditionally have been sort of like, at best, the work of developer tool people. And that's started to become more and more of what a platform is if you integrate this stack all together. Now, of course, once again, if you're interested in the best platform available, you can see the architecture for that. But if you look at platform architectures for anyone, you'll see that they all kind of follow the same pattern. Infrastructure at the bottom, all the goopy middleware stuff that you need to run an application, and then getting up to the UI layer. And nowadays, the actual developer, people call it an internal developer portal, which is terrible phrase, but I guess you have that. The kind of IDP that developers are using there, which has all sorts of great benefits that Betty in her opening talk kind of went over some of those and pointed towards those. So when you have a platform in place, let's go through. I'm gonna assume you in this case are kind of like infrastructure and operations people. Maybe you're an application developer that now wants to build these platforms or get to, so to speak. But let's go through the shifts that people have, what they do in these large organizations to make running a platform successful. So the first thing that's a huge shift is they think in terms of product, right? So they think about their platform as a product, as we at Pivotal Labs, now Tanzu Labs, and also at ThoughtWorks, a few other people started talking about, I think back in 2018 or 2017. And the notion of this is that you're not just delivering, what was it called? Infrastructure and capabilities. You're not just delivering services to an SLA to agreed upon specs, but you're more thinking about the application developers as your customers. And you're asking, what do we need to give them to be successful, to be good at what they're doing, maybe even to be happy if you like all the recent developer productivity discussion. Hopefully for them to be happier. And that is, you think about this platform as a product, which is something that as vendors are very familiar with. So that's kind of delightful for us. But you can see Thomas here from Mercedes-Benz. He's a platform owner for the Tanzu application service, the Cloud Foundry-based platform they run in there. And this is the shift that they go through. They product manage their platform, and they always are focused on what the application developers need and how to make things better. So an easy test is like, you should open up, I don't know, you maybe Outlook or your staff directory and search for the phrase product manager and see if you have any. And you can't really do the unfair thing of like, oh, we don't call it product manager. Like if you have a good product manager, they'll insist on being called a product manager. And so see if you actually have product managers doing this, and it'll give you a good indication of the potential that you have to shift to focusing on a product-centric way of doing things. Now, if you're not familiar with what product management is, again, this is an instance where there is, in the case of product management, there's probably at least 2 decades of understanding of what it is. So it's very easy to go look it up. I think that I should go update my recommendations because it's an older book. But the one that I like the most is called Escaping the Build Trap, which I think is a pretty clear explanation of what product management is with some good examples in it. But just to be very brief, what you do in product management is you identify a customer and sure, stakeholders like always security and compliance and costs and things like that. But you mostly focus on who the customer, the end user, a person is. And you study what they need. You come up with a theory of what it is, and you try to solve that problem for them or the pain point or whatever. And you go around and around in the circle, and you have a team of people who are working on that, like a product. We all kind of use software, and we kind of see how product management is done with it as a user. So imagine doing that with the platform, and imagine how this is different than if you're sort of given requirements for infrastructure to deliver, for the uptime and the performance, all of those things to deliver. And those are more of your customers in a traditional way of thinking about infrastructure, not always asking what the application developers need to be successful at what they're doing. Again, which is using software as kind of like the expression, the way your business operates and runs. So if you're product managing the platform, right? What is the product that you're building? Well, we saw the delightful, if questionable, pastel-y color scheme choice of what a platform looks like from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and also the best one available, the Tanzu application platform or the Tanzu application service, depending on how you like your containers orchestrated. But I like to think of kind of like the high-level product that you're delivering is this. And you can call this a value stream, or a couple of years ago, we like to use the fancy phrase secure software supply chain, which just rolls off the tongue. I always think of it as just like a pipeline, or like, how you deliver software from idea to someone clicking on stuff. And what you see here, hopefully is familiar, but you're thinking about, we've got an idea, how long, what activities are involved, and how long does it take us to deliver it to production? So we're moving pixels on the screen and someone using it. And this is very much so like the conduit, the channel, the pipeline that your application developers are using to get their software out the door. And so the first step, most people don't actually know everything that happens, let alone how long things happen here. But you can go through a path to production exercise, which we've documented on our website, or you can see lots of examples of doing it, where you actually get a bunch of people in a room or around a Miro board, and they chart this out. And oftentimes, this is the first time anyone has ever seen this full chart, this full way of doing things, and it's very revelatory. There's a lot of like staring at it and being like, whoa, there's a lot of stupid going on there. Or maybe look at that, there's a lot of great stuff happening there. But you want to chart this out, and as a platform group, you start to think about, how can we improve that? What can we do to make that better? Which often leads to putting build automation in place. Now, this is something that also over the years I'm always very interested in, is how have we been achieving that goal of making it so we can deploy our software on a weekly basis? Again, that may not be the best or the only way of measuring stuff, but if you can get your software out in front of a user every week or every 2 weeks, you can start to test out and get feedback and really refine what that software application looks like, right? If you can observe people using it, you can see if you've solved the problems in the best way. You can come up with new ways of solving the problems, and you map that back to the business or your organization. You can change how the business operates, right? The software no longer restricts the way the business functions. So if you look at surveys, I love a good survey. I also love kind of like a middling survey as well. I like surveys. But you can see, depending on, I think, kind of like the demographics of the people who answer the survey, things are not so great. You've got the people who answer the door, the DevOps report, and I assume they're people who are very enthusiastic about things. They're over there on the left side of the innovation curve, and you can see they're doing okay at deploying monthly or less. You go down to the continuous delivery. It might be deployment. I don't really understand the difference between delivery and deployment. It seems like if you've deployed something, you've delivered it, and once you've delivered it, you've deployed it. So whatever. But you can see from the CD Foundation, my dog has some thoughts on that. But you can see from the CD Foundation that they get a little bit better. And then we go down to Forrester, and things don't look good at all. People often criticize the industry analyst firms as being fuddy-duddy and talking to big companies and things like that, which is exactly the people I'm interested in. So I more or less trust them more, that like we're really not to the point where most people can deploy monthly or even less, right? So this is one of the first problems that as a platform team, you need to think about, is how do we just get this pipeline stuff in place and make it so that it's optimized so that developers are using it. And indeed, if you look at another survey of tool usage, which I haven't updated in a while, you can see that many organizations surveyed don't actually even have the tools in place to do this stuff. So it's little wonder that there's not enough organizations that can deploy monthly or less, let alone on a weekly or a twice weekly basis. So again, that's a huge problem area or opportunity for developers, for your customers as a platform team to figure out how to solve, and why. I don't know. I mean, if you don't really have build automation in place, you should watch the rest of my presentation and the ones that my coworkers and colleagues have. But after this conference here, you should run off and go solve this problem if you don't really think that you have build automation in place, because pretty much everything you're going to hear is going to depend on that being better. So speaking of doing product management, so we've got that build pipeline that we want to fix. What's kind of like the next thing? How do we get to the other things we're going to product manage? Because a product manager, a lot of what they're doing is they're coming up with problems they can solve for their customers. They're coming up with what's a pain point they have, as I was saying, some tool that I can give them. So if you're like most infrastructure and operations people, I mean, I guess you can ask yourself, you could say, when's the last time I talked with some application developers? Now, to be fair, I was an application developer. It's not like we make it easy to talk with us, very insular bunch. And we kind of don't trust other people. Trust is the wrong word, but there's always the other people who make us fill out tickets to get things. And there's a lot of bozo bidding and grudgery going on there. But part of what you want to do is kind of get over that. So it's good to start thinking and profiling what developers are doing. And one good way is to survey them, to ask them. And we opened up and made freely available a developer toil survey that we use, which does exactly this. Now, you can read over it if you want to, or once again, when you get the slides, you can go click on it and get it. But what this survey is doing from a product management standpoint, it's doing two things. One, it's finding out what you can do for developers, your customers. And two, as you ask the survey, let's say every month or maybe every quarter as things get going, you can start to track if the changes you've made have improved things, right? You get feedback about if it's working or not, which is great. Like that's what you're looking to do as a product manager, right? You want to come up with things to solve that your customers like, and then you want to track that you've solved them and getting feedback. Now, some people will say there's survey fatigue and developers are not going to spend the time every month or every quarter to fill this out, and they'll just put in answers. However, as an application developer, I assure you, it may not be the number one, but at least number two activity that developers like doing is complaining. That's why we need 90-minute lunches. You got to get the complaining in and then actually eat, decide where to go and things like that. But they would love to tell you what's wrong and what they think could be improved and complain. You could probably do it weekly, but that might be too much information. You could do it on a monthly basis and you won't get any complaints from developers unless you do nothing about it, which is its own problem. So then next, let's say you've got this platform in place and you've experienced this problem that I hear a lot about from people. And I live here in Amsterdam, and when they put a mugshot out of someone, they do this hilarious thing where they put a tiny black bar over their eyes, as if you'd be like, "Oh, I can't recognize that person at all." So that's the joke here. Thank you. And so I've anonymized who these people are, but I hear this over and over again. This is actually stock art, not the actual people. And what they say is, that's all great. We've built this platform for the developers, and now no one uses it, right? Like we've built it and no one's come to use it. And when I hear that, the first thing that I ask them, one, I go through this product manager thing to see if they've been doing that. But then also what I'm curious about is if they are doing not only product management, but product marketing. Are they thinking about how you do the internal marketing, the community building, even the advocacy, if you like, for the marketing? And usually the answer is like, yeah, we went to our cloud center of excellence and we put some material in there, or we have some documentation or some training, and we put it in the monthly email of things you should know. But when I've watched and talked with organizations over the years, they do a lot more than that, a lot more than you would traditionally think if you're familiar with like things like ITEL and service delivery, where you often build up a knowledge base and things like that, where you've got kind of a library of, well, I guess, knowledge. Instead, these organizations, from the very start of their platform, they start with at least one full-time person whose only job is platform marketing. Now, this might be called a platform advocate, or whatever you might want to call it. But their job is really to think about, along with the platform owner and often the management and executives who are kind of championing and sponsoring the platform, to think about the brand that you have, interactions with your customers, the developers. This advocate person will travel around, if that's how you like to do things, to, especially in large organizations, they have offices everywhere with little clusters of developers from either from acquisitions or just like organic growth. And I've seen these advocates, they go around and do miniature conferences to these at these little sites, and they talk with people. They advocate for, as the name would imply, and train and bring knowledge about the platform. And they also bring feedback from those people back to you, the platform people, to effectively product manage it. But equally important is the brand that you have, the identity that you build around the platform. And you can see some examples of that here, the name that you give it, and even like the book of principles that you might have built around it. Now, there's also just internal community management, whether you want to think of it as inner sourcing. There's just very straightforward but important things. Like one thing I always like to highlight is most all of, I think that means 70 to 75%. I'm not sure. It might mean 80%. But most all of the platform organizations I've talked with over the years, they establish very robust, that's a fun word to say, like chat sort of methods of talking with their community, whether it's in Matter or Slack or whatever it might be. And that becomes their primary way of working with their community. They don't really work with them and collaborate with them through ticketing systems. It's, like places like Garmin and Mercedes-Benz, others like ING, like pictured here, they actually use chatting with their end users, their developers, as the primary way that they work with them, which can be a little shocking for some people. But the important thing is to think about how you're doing this marketing, how you're doing community management around it, and really realize you need to do a lot of product marketing, right? If you have a product, you have to do product marketing, as many of us here in the product world can tell you. Now, if you're really interested in that, I'm giving a talk that details a lot of this at VMware Explore in Barcelona. I have it in my calendar, so I'm not that confused about when it is, but I think it's in November, the first part of November, which you can check out as well. It'll be delightful. So next, the last thing I want to go over is like, okay, so we're product managing the platform. We have kind of an idea of what it is. How do we roll this out? And there's two phases to rolling it out. The first one is starting very small. And the very small part is to start with maybe one or maybe two actual application teams, right? And this is a key part, is that you want to identify one of your customers, an actual application team, to be the early people using the platform as you're developing the platform. Because think about it, you're getting feedback about what's needed. You don't want to build a platform for 6, let alone 12 months and just hope you got it right. You want feedback from those teams as you're developing it. So you identify one of these teams that has an actual kind of like business facing a real application, and you just work with them. Now, of course, management and executives and yourself are going to have to kind of like find teams that are a good fit for this, but you probably have at least one. I mean, in a large organization of 10, 20,000 developers, I'm sure you can find one team that kind of fits this criteria, and do that for 3 or 6 months and really observe what's happening, kind of like work with that team and adapt and change what you're doing. Start small with that. Now, I'm emphasizing this because I talk with a lot of organizations, and their initial goal is they'll say things like, we're going to migrate 50 to 60% of our applications to this platform in the first 18 months. And generally, my thought on that is like, well, have fun failing, right? Because if you're going to do that amount of applications on a brand new platform in a new way of working, and just kind of rolling it out to teams without first learning how to do it, not let alone how it works in your organization, it's going to be very painful. And I've seen that over and over and over again. So start with an initial team to kind of learn how to go about doing it. Now, the second phase, and depending on how fast you want to operate when you try to do this, holidays people want to take, things like that. The second phase might be 6, 8, maybe even 12 months out, but you've built up a handful or maybe 2 handfuls of application teams. You've built out and learned how to do platform stuff. You've been product managing the platform, and it's been working out for you. And then what you do is you start to roll it out to more and more teams. Now, the way that I've seen this done is, and this is documented not only anecdotally in what we've done in the Tanzu world, a lot of our customers have done, but also in the last few years of the DevOps report, the DORA report, is you practice this thing of pairing and seeding. And that is on your application teams, if you're into it, which hygienically seems to work out well, project-wise, success-wise for teams, is you do pair programming, pair product management on teams, which has all sorts of great benefits. But those teams that were successful, you take some of the members of those people on those teams and you put them on the new teams. So peers are starting to teach and spread that knowledge of how to use that platform to other teams. But going back to marketing, they're also using one of the most powerful parts of tools of marketing called word of mouth. Now, word of mouth is just a fancy way of saying you will probably trust your friends and your coworkers, your peers, more than you'll just trust some vendor or even a delightful thought leader like me telling you that something is a good idea, right? You want someone that's got firsthand experience, that's kind of like you, or very much so like you, that is even working in the same organization with the constraints, telling you that this new way of working is effective and has benefits, but then also helping you through it. And so you can start to think that as you do this kind of like train the trainer, like spreading out people from successful projects and applications to new teams, you get this exponential effect where you can spread out more and more to these teams. So over the course of the next year or so, you're perfecting your platform, you're building up trust in it, you're adapting it to how your organization works, but you're also building up this community of people who effectively become the way that you spread and scale that knowledge out to other people, rather than just kind of rolling it all out from top, from your centers, raining down from the centers of excellence and hoping people follow along with it. I remember all these times in my career where I'd show up to do some thought leadering and talk with people, and also in that room they had a box full of books, and they were just going to hand those books out, and that was going to be helpful, which it was. Everyone likes getting a free book. Those tech books are very expensive, so it's nice to get them, and you should be appreciative that someone went through the hassle of procurement, of expensing that. But you also need people talking with each other, and that's what you're building up in this thing. So that becomes part of what the platform team does on top of that. So hopefully you can get the sense of what a platform is, right? And then it's about more than just sort of standing up the blinking cursor of a platform, right? And just trusting that people will come to use it. But there's a lot of product management that goes into it, right? This new role that most operations people don't have. And there's also a lot of product marketing that goes into it, and community management that organizations are successful with. And I think technology is very difficult and is critical. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working in a technology company. So it's not that technology is easy or isn't useful, but you also need to have the non-technology stuff on part of it. People might call this culture or process or roles or just ways of working. And I think that's what I see a lot out there that's missing when people want to build up a platform and they're not really getting the results that they want from it, is they haven't added all of this kind of non-technology stuff on top of it. But as I was saying, you can learn from like 5-7 years of other organizations, other large organizations doing exactly this kind of work, and kind of bring that to your organization and bring it forward to what you're doing, no matter what type of technology you're using. But of course, you'll be using the best technology available, which I've gone over several times here from my organization, from VMware. And with that, if you're interested in more, there's stuff you can get and ways you can follow up. And I guess I'll hang out in the excitingly named Pigeonhole and answer any questions that people might have. So thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the talk. It'll be great